Hello, this is Mark Holmes with another of Via Satellite's famed Thursday morning conversations. And this time we have a very special guest, the only two-time Via Satellite Executive of the Year, Matt Desch, the CEO of Iridium, someone I know very well. Firstly, Matt, how are you this morning?
Cheers, Mark. Thanks for having me. It's great to be on with you. These have been kind of fun to watch you do these things. I'm surprised you're interested in me, but thanks for asking.
No, of course. Now, we always start the conversation by talking about the sort of life away from the satellite industry. So away from sort of running a satellite company, what do you like to do in your spare time?
Yeah, well, don't have a lot of it, but when I do, no, I have a bunch of other interests. I think you can see around me here in my bunker that I broadcast from every day. You can see some airplanes and stuff. I've been a passionate pilot for 45 years. I got my license when I was 18, and I've been flying since, and still am very interested in protecting general aviation, supporting. In fact, I went flying over the weekend here. Had some excitement that made the trucks roll at Dulles Airport, but that's a whole nother story. And I've been involved in things like leadership at my alma mater, helping young kids. I don't have any kids myself, so I found that I really, really enjoy interacting with, high school and college kids to kind of mentor them and help them kind of get a faster start, being the kind of leaders that they want to become. So that's been sort of a fun thing to be involved in. I went to college on a caddy scholarship, just like Caddyshack, if you remember. I was a golf caddy. Not a lot of means in our family, so seeing ways, helping other kids of lesser means sort of get a chance to go to college and have a successful career is something that's been important to me. So I get involved in a lot of those kind of activities. But
fantastic. And are you a big football fan? American football fan, I should say.
Well, sure. I mean, I like college a lot better than I like pros. I mean, when you grow up in Central Ohio, you have the Bengals and Browns, so it doesn't lead you to thinking that you have any chance of ever getting a Super Bowl ring. So, the Ohio State Buckeyes are my home team, and so I'm certainly, though this was a very weird year. I mean, it was a disappointing year for football, not seeing anybody in the stands, not having all the traditions. Yeah. It was a tough year. I think this was sort of, we just give this a whole year of bypass and look forward to next fall.
So one football question. I know that they have a very good quarterback, Justin Fields, who's going to be one of the top picks in the draft. Do you think he's going to be the next big superstar from Ohio State?
Well, I hope so. I hope so for him. I think one of the things as I gotten older, I just see these kids are great people, and stuff, especially when you get to know them, and you just hope that they can achieve their dreams and stuff. I mean, they're not just great athletes, but a lot of them are really good people too. And it's so hard. I mean, there's just so much competition right now. Even these superstar 5-star quarterbacks turn out to be, it's hard. Look at Dwayne Haskins, who was the previous one who, struggled coming out too early and stuff, and who knows where he'll be. But there's just a lot of fantastic players. Their careers lasted, most of them, about 2 or 3 years, and I just hope they have a backup, for their life. That's one of the things that I preach to them is, make sure you get your education and know you have a longer term plan.
We use these conversations to often talk about sort of movies and music and dramas, what you've been watching. Are you a big movie watcher, dramas, or anything you've watched during lockdown that you've really enjoyed?
Yeah, I've seen you've been asking people that. I was afraid you'd ask me that. I'm not a huge TV watcher. I have to say I finally discovered streaming. You can see how cool I am. I thought, having 5,000 channels on your cable TV was where you wanted to be, and now I realize there's nothing on any of them anymore. So it's all moved on to streaming. I've been watching stuff that is, I'm always attracted to stuff that's kind of kookier and fun and stuff like that. A friend just put me onto Ted Lasso, which I highly recommend. That's kind of a hoot. I watched let's see, I think it was, I used to like Westerns, so I've enjoyed The Mandalorian. I mean,
Okay.
I'm kind of mostly through season one and slowly moving. I just don't move very fast on these things. I like The Boys, which is on Amazon, which is sort of a better take on it. These big giant movies, that the Avengers and the Star Wars stuff, those are too much and overdone and never meet the hype. But some of these quirkier things, like I saw 1917 recently that I recommend. I saw Jojo Rabbit. That was fun. I liked what was it? Yeah, I can't think of the other one. Oh, it was Knives Out. I recommend that one. That was kind of a fun one too. I like that one as well.
Okay.
And if you like space, try For All Mankind. That was kind of a cool one. My chief legal officer suggested I watch that, and that's sort of an alternate reality for the space industry. If anybody hasn't seen that one.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of people by doing these Thursday morning conversations. There's definitely a strong pull towards science fiction and space movies. So I'm sure they'll be grateful for any recommendations. What would you say like your favorite movie of all time is? If you had to pick one, is there one that you would sort of say? If you say what would be your recommendation?
Well, honestly, I don't have a favorite one. I don't have one I keep going back to or anything like that. I love the character ones that I keep kind of coming back to if you can kind of explore something else with them. Being an aviation buff, almost anything with flying, so I can't help but look at the one on Howard Hughes, with DiCaprio or something like that, where you just see kind of the birthplace of the aviation industry. But I don't really have a favorite.
Are you a big music fan? Favorite artists, musicians?
Well, if I'm in my car, which none of us are in as much anymore, but I'm probably listening to news radio. I'm probably more of a news junkie, but I mean, I love all kinds of music. I have an eclectic taste. In my college years, I was a big Talking Heads fan, and so I still love David Byrne. I'd recommend American Utopia if anybody gets a chance to see that. I'd love to see that on Broadway. It's just quirky and fun. You feel good about it, but no, I mean, I pretty much. I have to say, in the last couple months, I've turned news radio off a lot because I couldn't take it anymore. So that would click into my Tesla's, top 10, one, and that kept me at least current and everything. But beyond that, no, I'm not a huge.
So, is there anything particularly current that you like that you listen to or not that came up on a playlist that you thought was, yeah, that's not bad?
Oh, and every time something, you don't want to be in the car with me like when Ed Sheeran comes on or something, because you'll end up hearing me full-throated sing along. So I will sing along in the shower and with the people that are easy to sing with. You don't want to hear my Adele or anything. Definitely not with the octave of voice that I have. So.
Wow, that's quite an image. You doing karaoke to Adele or Ed Sheeran at Satellite. Maybe that's an idea. I'm just sort of curious as well. But you mentioned about your sort of passion for aviation that goes back decades, almost back to your teenage years. And I know, ironically, when you and I first came across each other, you were in the telecom sector. And I just sort of wondered, did you ever have a sort of a similar passion for space when you were younger, or did that sort of come later? Through your career?
No, it was actually quite early. I didn't plan to go into this industry, right on, but, I grew up in Dayton, Ohio, which was the birthplace of aviation. I walked by the Wright's home, from school, at least where Orville lived later in life, though he died 10 years before I walked by it. But I was, aviation was all around me, and in fact, I joined an Air Explorer post, really on, but I was also really interested in space because it was happening at the same time, in the '60s and '70s, all the moon missions, etc. So I had my my Saturn V rocket and everything else like that, but I didn't think I'd be in that industry. I thought it was it just wasn't, it was too small in a sense of, an industry, and it was going away as I was really coming into my college years. It was starting to wind down. People were a lot less interested in what it was about. And we hadn't really gotten into communication satellites and those sort of things. So I started really my career more in the terrestrial world, in cellular, the early days of cellular communications, very early on when there was only about 1 million cell phones out there. And I wasn't sure that was going to be a big industry, but that was exciting to be part of the early stages of that, see that industry evolve. And obviously I grew with it. And a lot of that skill set and information informed me when I moved to Iridium, in the sense of communications and taking that into space and everything. But yeah, I love space. I used to hang out on Saturday mornings at the Air Force Museum, in Dayton. My dad would drop me off in the morning, and I would just go, exhibit by exhibit, and he'd pick me up in the afternoon. And love seeing both the space and the aviation exhibits.
So when the opportunity at Iridium came along, was it something that you felt a natural gravitation towards, or were you skeptical given Iridium's somewhat checkered history at the time?
Somewhat checkered history. It was a very checkered history. And I was actually, back in the 90s, I was president of a company called Nortel Networks, and in our wireless industry, I saw Motorola creating this thing, and I was extremely skeptical, not so much of the technology, but of the business case. spending all that money and believing you were sort of going to compete with cell phones didn't make sense to me, and turned out didn't make sense, from a business perspective. But I'd been doing some other things. Most of my early career was in sort of the manufacturing of technology for the communications industry, and I knew that industry was commoditizing. I saw everything was moving. Huawei was the big competitor. Everybody was trying to figure out how to downsize or outsource their R&D, and I wanted to do something where you could really innovate and do something different. And when they called in 2005, I guess it was, and they said, would you be interested in looking at Iridium? And I thought, Iridium? I didn't know it was still around either. I hadn't been watching the last couple of previous few years. But I thought, wait a minute, this is a really unique platform. It's in the right place at the right time, especially in moving into things like IoT. And I thought, this would be a platform, for innovation. This could be something where you could really do something to compete with others and do something better than others. And it was really not a, quickly commoditizing area. So I was really attracted to it for that. I love moving away from sort of selling stuff to operators to being an operator where somebody could sell something to me. That seemed like nice, and to compete as an operator. I have to say I think I was the 6th CEO in 6 years, from what I heard. So I didn't think I'd be here very long. I didn't think I'd expect to be here 14, 15 years later. And I knew it would be a big challenge, but I thought it was sort of I didn't think it was much as a technical challenge as it was sort of a business challenge to figure out how we could get the next generation system financed and built and continue to operate. And it's very hard, as you know, and I've talked about it a lot, to create a company in our space given the capital requirements and the challenges. And I know it would be a challenge, but I kind of saw a path through it, and I thought that this could be a really fun one to be part of. And it has been. It has been a lot of fun.
It has been, and we've kind of watched it throughout, and it's been a great story to cover. Let's talk about sort of like last year and sort of the adjustments that Iridium and you yourself made as a CEO when the pandemic really sort of started to hit, and how it sort of changed the way you do things at Iridium. Tell us a little bit about what it was like for you last year.
Well, it was as shocking to me as I think it was with everybody in the industry, when we started finding out about this in February and March. And I realized, it was second week of March, I think it was, and I said, this we have to protect our employees. We have to figure out a way to get out of here. And I sent everybody home. I really had all managers meeting. I think it was on like March 16th or something like that. And on March 17th, we said, go work from home and we'll call you back, which I thought would be a couple months. Didn't expect to be here, sitting here almost a year later, still in the same mode. But we've had to we've had to adapt like everyone else has. I'm really proud of how our team has adapted. You know, the technology helps, but I think a lot of it is sort of having built a strong culture and having a team that sort of was ready for this. You know, we're a very cohesive group. We all know what our mission is. We know what's involved. We have a strong management team, and that's really helped us kind of work through all the different challenges. It has been sort of a leadership challenge. I think I've learned a lot about sort of this kind of environment that, or at least discovered things. I mean, you know, one of the key ones to me has been communication. You know, you just got to over communicate in this kind of environment, you know, and if you're not a communicator, it's not going to be a good place for you. And I thought, you know, I was surprised to find that Microsoft Teams, you know, I discovered it had a record button, and I thought, wait a minute, I should record a message to people. And we started that. I did this thing called we decided to call it a Teams Talk. And I did my first because I could tell people were really nervous. You know, they were really worried about, you know, what about their kids? You know, what, if they had to come back to work, how are they going to manage it? What were we going to do about it? And, you know, how are we going to manage through it? And so this started, you know, every week or two sending out a message. And I've done that all year long. And people have said that they really appreciate that. But, you know, we've all had to find ways of connecting with each other in different ways. It's been certainly a crazy year, and I hope it ends before long too. I did find a way, but I'm an extrovert. I wasn't sure of that. I thought it was sort of, you know, in between, but I'm definitely on the spectrum, a lot closer to extrovert. So I was particularly struggling, I think, early on, just not being able to, you know, be with people and reading those cues and being around people and, you know, pulling energy from that sort of thing. But learn to do it in a different way.
No, it's fantastic. I mean, in terms of like the ability to sign customer contracts and do business, I mean, how was that affected? I mean, obviously, it's a very global business. We're used to getting together and, you know, doing those contracts in person. And what's it been like from Iridium's perspective?
Yeah, I think like everybody else, you know, this going online, going virtual as we have, has been both a problem, but also a benefit. I mean, we wouldn't be doing something like this as we were talking about, you know, if we hadn't sort of learned to work in this kind of environment. I think this is going to be something we've learned a lot. This is going to be the environment we're going to sort of be working in a hybrid environment long term. But yeah, with our partners, I mean, we have 450, 470, something like that. You know, existing partners, it wasn't too much of a challenge. In fact, in some ways, it was a benefit because we turned all this time into doing webinars for them and having training sessions. And, you know, I had a meeting with, you know, one of our good partners who lives in a very far away place. And, you know, I got a whole tour of his operation, you know, virtually as he took me around and talking to the team. And, you know, we might not have met, but every couple of years when he made it, you know, to Tyson's, and here it was, we were able to meet and talk about some subjects on a regular basis. So it's been both a positive from that perspective, and of course, we miss, you know, the unexpected meetings. I think it's a little harder to close new partners. It's been a little challenging. I'm really excited. Asia's starting to open up a bit more, and we're starting to see a lot more activity there. You know, we typically bring on 20, 30 new partners every year, particularly in the IoT space, maybe more sometimes. You know, last year we probably brought on only about 24 or something like that, you know, so it wasn't as many because it's harder to have those discussions and close new deals and contracts to build that sort of trust to finalize things. But I think that's going to start opening up here again in 2021. We're already starting to see more activity, and now that everybody's a little bit more comfortable in this environment, I think we're just going to start seeing things move a bit faster.
No, fantastic. I mean, I have to get your sort of comments on the current state, particularly of the LEO market, which we've seen some big news, the rise, the fall, and potential rise again of OneWeb. Obviously, Telesat's probably got something, is going to give more details about their plans soon. Where do you sort of see all this going? I mean, you know, the numbers of satellites we're talking about are, I mean, I know when we joined the industry a couple of decades ago, it seems quite frankly a little bit ridiculous of the numbers of satellites we're talking about now. What's your overall take on where I suppose the LEO market is potentially headed?
Yeah, and only I would say I only correct you a little bit to say I hate to call it the LEO market because when you say that, then I have to say we're not in the LEO market. We happen to be an L-band supplier of a certain kind of service, as you know, and I'm constantly, people assume that every time someone launches another satellite in LEO, they're a competitor to us, and when in fact, we're really complementary to all these new Ka and Ku band operators that are really competing in the what used to be called the fixed satellite services business as opposed to the mobile satellite services business. Because they're all they come from the architecture of how much speed can I get to a terminal. So their whole architecture is around terminals that are pretty large and somewhat expensive and not typically very mobile. They're fixed on the top of maybe a vehicle or something, but even then it's challenging. Where we kind of come from the architecture of how much speed can we get into a really small little package that could fit in the palm of your hand, and that's just two totally different architectures, and they're very complementary. So we're probably going to be collaborating with all these guys. We have some relationships with a number of them already, and people are looking to put our technologies together. So that withstanding, there's an awful lot of them, as you said, more than you would think the market would bear for this commodity broadband business that they're all going after, including the geos, which are not going away and have really strong sort of market and technology thesis as well as they expand their capacity. There's an awful lot of capital being deployed. Some have particular advantages over others, particularly if they own part of the equation in terms of launch. That's an advantage for some. Having a lot of satellites is probably an advantage because it gets you a lot more capacity and it enables you to possibly drive down costs. And in a commodity kind of environment, that's going to be critical because if these guys all exist, then the prices are going to be really, really low, which is fantastic for broadband consumers in remote parts of the world. That's very exciting. But begs the question whether they'll be able to succeed financially doing that because they'll all be chasing sort of the same revenue streams and hard to know if the market will support that. We come from a specific part where high capital costs it took a long time, longer than expected. The market changed a lot, and then we failed along with a lot of others. I'm hoping that isn't the cycle these guys all go through. But there's hope springs eternal, and there's a lot of money pouring into the space industry, and that's kind of good for all of us. A lot of technology being developed around a number of different areas, from launchers to small satellites to communication technologies to optical crosslinks to all kinds of things that can benefit our next generation network way down the line. So I'm happy to see that. I think there's a bit of a bubble going on. I mean to say that, but you start to see these SPACs and things, and crazy valuations for just ideas that have not even been proven yet. And then you start going, be careful. We've seen this movie before, and there's nothing to say why the movie will be any different this time around. So. But for most part, I'm a fan and hopeful, but I think everybody's a little more circumspect this time around than it was in the 90s when Iridium was created.
Do you think we are at another sort of golden age for the industry now? I mean, aside from obviously the pandemic issues, which may hold back, I guess, businesses maybe a little bit, but overall, when you look at sort of IoT, you look at mobility, government, telecoms, I mean, all being well, if we're able to come through the pandemic over the next year, are we sort of at another golden age for the industry, do you believe?
Oh, I think so. I mean, I think there's just the money pouring into our industry and the number of companies being created and the ideas being explored of all different types are, it's very exciting, and problem is it feels a little bit like, the late 90s when, everybody suddenly discovered the industry and rushed into it like in the last year and then wished they hadn't, So I don't know if it's the last year. I mean, I'm hoping it's not. I hope we, I hope everyone is a little bit more careful this time and manages those those investments a little differently, and that people don't get overheated and throw lots of stuff that won't stick. But unfortunately, that's sort of how these boom and bust cycles work, and that's how investment cycles work. And we need to take advantage of it while we can, and develop a lot of technologies and do a lot of things. And there will be winners, out of this. Unfortunately, I don't think everybody will be one, but there will be winners, and there will be new capabilities, and there'll be exciting new sort of industries created, and that's a good thing.
Okay, we always like to.
We were, it only took us 30 years to get to the success we're now enjoying. I'm hoping all of them are able to do it a little faster than we were, but I think a lot of them sort of come out with plans, and they say we'll launch in, we've just started, we're launching in 2 years, we'll be profitable in 3 or 4, and history doesn't support that thesis. It always takes a lot longer. It's a lot more expensive. It's a lot more challenging. A lot of other people kind of ride the same bandwidth, and then you end up. You got to really be patient, and you got to be clever, and you need a few miracles to occur. And I think we got all those to occur finally, and that's put us in the position we are in today.
Actually, it's a very little known fact, but one of my first ever satellite interviews was actually way back in the late 90s with Ed Stiano of Iridium. I think it was actually the first or second pure satellite interview I actually did. I'm not sure there's a record of any of it. I'm not sure you can find it online now, but it was actually one of the first. I actually interviewed Telly Desic as well around the same time. So a little bit of a background there. That was when I was mainly in telecoms. I always like to end on a fun question. So I want to go back to music. You mentioned Talking Heads as one of your favorite bands. So for I know that the music taste is something all of our listeners enjoy. What's your favorite Talking Heads song? Give us a song that all of the satellite community should listen to on Spotify.
Well, we were, I think, one of the first to ever have a Spotify playlist for our launches when we had the Iridium Next system, and that was kind of fun. We obviously had 8 successful SpaceX launches, and we, I think my team had some fun with it. My marketing team had some fun with it by lining up songs for the different periods, because we, when you have 8 launches in a row, you start getting really good at knowing exactly what's going to occur with everything. But they said, what do you want to put in there? In the launch list, and I said "Burning Down the House," of course, which was of course the first perfect one for when the engines ignite and you have liftoff. But yeah, probably that one. If I said "Psycho Killer," you'd worry about me, but I think "Burning Down the House" would be a better one here.
Excellent. Well, I think we'll leave it there. Matt, it's been an absolute pleasure. I mean, I know you and I go back many years. It's always a pleasure to catch up with you, and congratulations on making, you and your team and everybody at Iridium for making Iridium such a success story over the last decade and a half. It's been a fantastic story to cover. I wish you, your friends, your loved ones, your colleagues, the best of health and staying safe over the course of the year. And we look forward to hopefully catching up with you soon. So thank you very much.
All the best to you, Mark. Thanks. It's been fun. Take care.
Thanks.